Our guest today is a hard-working woman who strives to make a difference by giving back to the community, helping others, and supporting women. She believes that imperfections make you human and that everyone should be themselves, and that being resilient and having the ability to separate the noise from the constructive criticism is an important skill to have to help you learn and grow. She's the anchor on CP24 and co-host of Toronto's #1 morning show, CP24 Breakfast. She shares with us how practice, going above and beyond expectations, asking lots of questions, and making genuine connections have helped her on her journey to where she is today, and also how it can help you. Please welcome Pooja Handa to the show today. And now introducing your host, President and co-founder of Women Leadership Nation, Jennifer Ladisser.
So thanks so much for being part of this podcast.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
Oh, absolutely. So, before I ask you what the one question I ask everybody, I wanted to share, I actually studied journalism. I love that profession.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What made you decide not to pursue it?
Oh, you know what? I ended up being introduced to public relations. So when you take journalism, you have to take PR. And then I kind of fell more in love with that. And I thought, okay, let's go there. But then I ended up in other areas too. So I think maybe I'm just really distracted type of person.
No, but and you've talked to so many women now, so I'm sure you can compare notes of everybody's journey and their stories, but seems to be a common thread that people sort of set out to do one thing and end up somewhere sometimes completely different or somewhere else, which I think just sort of speaks to all of our individual journeys that, you go in thinking one thing and life happens and other things lead to other paths and you just don't know what that journey is going to look like.
So for you, when you were young, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I always knew that I was a performer. So I was that kid on the street who was, putting on plays. Like we weren't playing house, I was acting.
Yeah.
That kid. So I always knew I wanted to do something that was performance based. I thought when I was younger that meant I was going to be an actress. So I thought, okay, I'm going to move to Hollywood. My name's going to be in bright lights. I'm going to be famous. It's going to be amazing. And then, like I said, life happens. And
yeah.
It's great to have dreams and it doesn't mean you can't come back to them, but they don't always work out exactly the way you think they will.
Right. Or, you start to, I think when you grow up, you start to realize maybe there's steps towards that. So what was your journey? So how did you get into what you're doing today? Sort of what was your route?
So I actually tried to pursue acting. I moved to New York City. I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. I auditioned to get into the school, got in. It's a very prestigious school. I didn't have the money to do it. My parents had saved money since I was 2 years old for my education. And I blew that in the 1 year of tuition at that school. And that didn't include books, it didn't include living, it didn't include anything else. But my parents were kind enough to give me that opportunity to pursue the dream. So moved to New York City at 18, had no idea what I was getting myself into.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the Big Apple is overwhelming at that age. And I think, I was sort of in my bubble here. And when I moved there, I realized, okay, money's not going to be the only problem in life. There's a lot at play here. So eventually what ended up happening is I decided to come back home and pursue an education in broadcast journalism. So I left school after a year and I ended up going to Seneca College and York University. So I got a degree in women's studies, which is...
Oh, very interesting.
Yes. And then I also went to Seneca for broadcast journalism. So the way I saw it in my mind was, how do I still perform? Because I and I know I'm good at it, but then also take my academics, because I did very well in school as well, and combine the two. And broadcast journalism just seemed like the perfect fit.
That's amazing. And I think that's a great example of how you really have to take that passion that you have, but also have a little bit of realism in terms of how can you get started, and having that balance is, and it also gives you a different perspective. So how would you say, your experience in New York, especially at 18, I can't imagine, that's amazing. How do you think that did that build your confidence, or what were some of the incredible benefits from that experience?
Well, I think one of the first life lessons that I learned was that, you can have all sorts of idealistic views of the world and ideas and dreams, but you have to also remember that, they don't always work out exactly the way you want them to. So I think getting sort of that dose of disappointment and something that was completely out of my control, here I was, this young, hopeful person with all this talent that I wanted to showcase, but I didn't have the means financially to be able to keep it going. And so it's out of your control. What can you do? You pivot. And I think that was a really good lesson for me at a young age, that you can pivot and you can still find gratification out of whatever it is that you pursue. And you got to figure out what that is. So I'm lucky that for me, I found it in broadcast journalism, but also I realized the lesson learned as well is have a backup plan, in case this doesn't work out. And women's studies for me was that backup plan, because I thought, what do I really want to do? I want to make a difference. And here's a place where I really think that, one, I know nothing about. And two, I really would like to actually be able to say in my life that I've helped other women. And that's sort of part of my lifestyle and my way of thinking.
Oh, I can relate so much. So how did you then, journalism is definitely a very competitive industry. And so how did you get into, where you are today? What was your journey, and what were, certainly some people that I've spoken to, and certainly in my experience as well, a lot of volunteering to try and get your name out there. What were some of the angles and ways that you did to kind of grow your career?
Yeah, it was the same. A lot of interning, a lot of working for free. You do that as a way to learn, but also a way to connect and make connections, obviously. So for me, I was volunteering locally. I was at a Rogers Cable. It was a local show that we had in where I grew up in Mississauga. So I was doing that. At the same time, I was interning at a radio station. I was interning at another network as well. So I was doing everything sort of behind the scenes, making those connections. And what ended up happening is, while I was interning behind the scenes at Global News, I had made enough of an impression on the person that I was interning for that she marched into the boss's office and said, "You got to hire this girl. She's great." And my way of sort of making an impression with her is every single thing that I could possibly do to go above and beyond to get her attention, I did. Because as interns, you sort of aren't really trusted to do much. And they have an intern in every few weeks. So you have to be memorable. And how could I do that? So, I would do things like I'd be sitting there and I would just pick up some books that she had on her shelf, and I'd, earmark certain things in the book that I thought were interesting or would make a good news story. Before she came in, I'd read all the papers and take out clippings and have them on her desk, so that when she got there, I'd be like, "Oh, these are the stories I found that are health related. What do you think? What would you choose? Take me through your thought process." I asked a lot of questions. So I think because I did all of these things, she knew that I was somebody that she could sort of vouch for. And anyway, I ended up getting a job behind the scenes at Global. I did that for a year. And then a job came up to be on air on a breakfast show. And I auditioned. I did not get a very good sort of interview, if you will. Like, it didn't go well because I had no experience technically in a Toronto market. I'd only worked behind the scenes. And anyway, that sort of, I thought, was a chapter closed. I ended up getting a job at the Rogers Cable station that I was also volunteering at, paid. So I gave my notice to Global, said, "Okay, I'm leaving." And they said, "Wait, before you go, we're actually considering you for this breakfast show."
Wow.
Like, there's no way.
Yeah.
It didn't go very well. And I'm shocked. And they said, "Well, the truth is, we offered the job to somebody else. They turned it down. And now we're 2 weeks to air."
Oh, but you know what? It's like everything in life happens for a reason, right? And
Yep.
so the timing is perfect. And so how did you get that courage? I think a lot of people can relate to the fact that, something doesn't go well and then that kind of beats them up a little bit in terms of their confidence. How did you get that courage to get out there and to do something that's, so public, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they probably also saw something incredible in you, right?
Well, the
So
one thing that I will say that I was always doing sort of behind the scenes, no matter what, is I was practicing and I was honing my skills. So I was that girl who was looking in front of the mirror and I had the hairbrush and I was pretending that I was a reporter and I was
that's awesome.
always doing that. So what I would do is I would read an article in the newspaper or in a magazine, and then I would take that story and I would sort of memorize what the story was, and then I'd regurgitate it in my own words and sort of practice that way so that I could take in a lot of information and then be able to, sort of spit it out and in my own words and tell a story, because ultimately that's what it is. It's storytelling. So because I learned how to do that and I was practicing, by the time I actually got to the opportunity, it wasn't that hard. It was still very scary, but I had confidence that I could do it. So when it came to learning everything that there was to learn about traffic, which is what I was, a traffic reporter, I took out the Pearlies, which I'm really dating myself. It's a map book.
Yeah.
And I just looked at, all the streets and all the highways, and I sort of memorized what was what. And I made sure I knew my sense of direction. And so that when I went and ad-libbed what was happening in traffic, I knew what I was talking about.
That's amazing. Isn't that exciting though? When you're at that point in your career where you're like learning something new, there's kind of like that pressure but then you're nailing it, which is incredible, right?
So true. And I think I've carried that throughout my career, where now I'll just take things on because that's sort of exciting and scary all at the same time. But I also just know in the back of my mind, I can do it. And if I overthink it, I'll never do it. So just jump in kind of thing. And I think that's been my whole career, actually.
And that's great. And I also think like you can't understate or overstate the fact that it takes hard work. And a lot of times people don't necessarily see that, but there's a lot of hard work. Certainly I know experience in my life where you think, oh my gosh, am I ever going to get there? But then eventually it just happens. So, in terms of the woman and female experience in journalism, would you say that, what was your experience then versus now? Do you feel like the industry is changing?
For sure. But I will say I was really lucky because I had someone, first of all, the woman I interned for, her name was Christine Crosby. She's since passed away, but at the time she was amazing. And I looked up to her because she was not only doing what I wanted to do for a living, but she was warm, she was friendly, she was a mom. She, was dedicated to her family. And I thought to myself for the first time, oh, it's possible to have a family and to work in this business, and all of this can happen and you can still be this really nice, kind person. Oh my goodness, I want to be like that. And so my very first experience of having that sort of mentorship came from a woman like that.
Wow.
Beautiful thing, because it made me then know in my heart of hearts that no matter where my career ended up, that I was going to do that for other women as well. I was going to make sure that I paid it forward. And as I continued in my career, I've met a lot of women like Christine. And, Ann Romer is another example at CP24. When I got there, she sort of took me on her wing. And I don't even know if she knew that she was doing it, but she was, again, so warm. And just in watching her, and she was so good. She was so talented, and people just loved her. And I was always trying to crack the code because she was lovely in real life, but that doesn't always translate on TV.
Right.
It did with her. So I always wanted to know, what was it that she was doing to resonate with people? And I watched her and learned so much. So I would say to begin with, I lucked out because I had such great experiences, but yes, the industry has changed a lot since then. And I think more and more women are realizing that as competitive as our industry is, there's room for everyone. And there's no reason why we can't help one another. We're better when we help one another.
And would you say there's not only room for one another, but from a differentiation perspective, it's also better to be yourself, like be your authentic self? How does that play into your position and how you've been able to grow?
Well, it's hard because it's easier said than done. I think, and a lot of women can probably relate to this in corporate Canada, where you feel like you have to sort of put on this, I'm confident, I'm brave, I'm not scared of anything, I have no emotions, I'll come to work sick, I'm all those things because I've got something to prove. And with what I do for a living, I have to sound smart while I'm doing it. I have to be able to string a sentence together that's grammatically sound. I'm going to be scrutinized with what I'm wearing and how I look and, the facial expressions and all of those things. So it's hard to be yourself when all of that is going on. But I realized in my career that in the beginning, I felt like I had to be so serious and I had to be, one of those people that everybody saw as professional. And it was so much work, all the overthinking.
Yeah.
When I actually stopped doing all of that and I just didn't care about the words that were coming in my mouth, I just spoke the way I speak, imperfections and all, that was what made me human. That's what made everybody else. That's what made me relatable. And that was cracking the code, was be yourself. Go figure.
That's amazing. And so, so again, in this industry, for those that are trying to get into it, what recommendations do you have for, women trying to get into this industry and in journalism, but, definitely on camera, but also behind the scenes? Do you have any advice?
Yeah. And I think, some of the things we've already talked about, I think it's so important to remember that there is room for everyone. And it can get even competitive, even at the education level, right? Because you're all competing for these internships. There's only a handful that are going out there. So it's remembering that you're working hard and you're striving for what you want to achieve, but that doesn't mean you don't help other people along the way. And you just never know where those connections are going to lead. I can't tell you how many people I went to school with who are now in management positions, so you absolutely don't know, and you never want to burn any bridges. So I think that's important, but most important is the ability to be resilient, because so much is thrown at you, no matter what industry you're in. And you have to be able to take, the highs, the lows, all of it, and then bounce back. And how do you keep doing that, especially in a business where you are being scrutinized and it is very critical? You have to be able to take what you need to take from that and then grow, because some of it is honest, which right? Because you get to grow as a human and you get to grow as a broadcaster. Some of it is just noise, and you've got to be able to separate the two.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm thinking back to even like many, many years ago. I won't date myself. When I took journalism, there was like no YouTube, it just, the social media wasn't to the extent it is today. Do you think that the access to be able to almost create your own channel, do certain things, does it give people opportunities to grow in this industry? But also, is it something that they have to be really cautious of, when you're younger and you're posting certain things, then you want to get into a career in journalism and certain things pop up from the past that you maybe shouldn't have posted, right? It's kind of a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah, because one of the things we were taught in school, and I don't know if this was your situation as well, is that, look, go to a smaller market where nobody will see you.
Yeah.
Your mistakes, and then come to the big market, and that way you're sort of a little more refined in your skills. And that doesn't exist obviously now with social media and YouTube, but I think it's still like there's way more positives than so that means that you should be careful about what you post, and you should be sure before you go ahead and upload it. I think you have to be one of those people who is really, really looking at yourself critically as well, and making sure that you've covered all your bases. So I think that's important. But to have a platform like YouTube, or even on social media on Instagram or TikTok, and have followers, that is really powerful in our business, because there are so many people you'll see on TV that end up on TV because they have a following. And if you can prove you already have a following, then, ratings, all the other things that come with a successful show, that's half the battle. And you're bringing that with you. So if somebody's not giving you an opportunity, if the executives don't see it, because many of them won't, unfortunately, that is our business. You have to go and build it yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you can, and you get that following, your ticket in is a lot easier that way.
Right.
Than, knocking on the door over and over again and getting no's.
So you were talking about resilience. So I want to and I've talked to every guest so far about COVID. From your perspective, how has that changed your industry, and how has it also changed you personally in terms of how you balance work and life?
Well, I think that, during the start of this pandemic, I think all of us just sort of thought this was going to be a few weeks. I don't think us thought that 6 months later we would still be in this. So what I've learned is it's been a very fluid situation, and it literally changes day to day. We've been at work the entire time, considered an essential worker. But beyond that, just knowing my responsibility to people, we're a public service at the end of the day. People at the beginning of the pandemic were turning to us for information. There were so many questions, and we made sure that we had doctors on to answer those questions. We had the mayor on to answer those questions, and we're still doing that. So I think what I learned through this is that how important this role actually is. Sometimes I would think, okay, well, am I really making a difference on this show that I'm on? It's great. It's fun. It's a nice way to make a living. But at the same time, am I really making a difference? And I think this experience has taught me that we are, that you're not just showing up in people's homes and telling them what's happening in the world. There is this connection there where people rely on you, and we were a sense of normalcy for people. So, I really did take that to heart. And I think through this process, I've, seen so many stories that are just heartbreaking, and you read the news and it can be, at times even debilitating to read some of the things that, or see some of the things that we have. So it's also taught me that that's okay, to be human and to feel what you're feeling. And there are days where you just don't feel like you want to do anything, or you don't feel good about you, or you're uncertain about what the future is. That's okay. This is unprecedented times. So I'll just give ourselves a break.
I couldn't agree more. I think that people are struggling, and as it continues to go on, and as we get into the winter, to be able to turn the TV on and have a little bit of levity, to be able to have the experts in that. And I do believe that you're making a huge difference. Not only are you an incredible inspiration to so many women, but you are also helping and providing critical information. And COVID has definitely shown just the essential services and who we really value in our world, and that would kind of become a community, which is really nice. Mm-hmm. And so in your role, what are some of the biggest risks that you've taken in your career or on your journey, and sort of how did you navigate those?
Well, I think this business is risky to begin with. Most people will tell you, don't do it. And the reason why they'll tell you don't do it is because if you really start to look at it realistically, my job that I have one of 5 jobs in all of Toronto. One of 5 jobs.
Wow.
You think about it, all of Canada wants to work in Toronto in this market if you are in broadcast. This is where you want to be. So you're now in a job that many people want to get to. Mm-hmm. Talk about it being competitive. It is just that difficult to get to that point. It's taken me almost 20 years in my career to get to this dream job that I have now, but that's how long it's taken. So I think this is probably the riskiest thing I could have done. It's nice to have a steady paycheck. That part's good. But in terms of movement and growth, it's slow because it is so competitive. So you really have to put in the time. You really have to put in the work. Nothing happens overnight.
And so you'd say too, you probably have to have that passion in your heart that you just that drive that wakes you up every morning, even though it's difficult, and move forward. So, what do you see in terms of your future then? What other, either professionally or personally, like what other ambitions or drives do you have? Or, you talk about wanting to make a difference, which you already are, but
I hope so.
Yeah.
The list is long, but I think most recently, as we talk about Black Lives Matter and the movement and ending systemic racism and just really those barriers to entry that exist, even as we talk about journalism, the way the program is set up, the way internships are set up, they're not conducive to women of color, women from low income, backgrounds. So we need changes, and I definitely want to be a part of that change, and I want to create access. So one of my goals is to really have some sort of mentorship plan in place where it's not just taking young people under my wing and showing them the way, which I've been doing for many years. It's very specific to BIPOC and making sure that there is access. If there's somebody or something within this business that I can help you with, I want to be that liaison. And I have a good network of people in this business that I can also connect young people to, and not just young, because why should you not have access to our industry if you're not in school? Or, if you have a dream of being on TV, no matter what age, you should have access. There should be a path for you. So I want to be a part of that and be a part of that change. But also when it comes to our coverage and our content, I've made it a goal to make sure that now I'm consciously thinking about and seeking out more diverse stories so that we're telling those stories, those voices are being heard. That's really important that we continue to do that. I'm in a position where I don't make decisions. I don't have that power, but I have power to pitch ideas. And so I'm always trying to do that. Aside from what I'm doing in television, I would love to write a book. I have so many stories to tell of all the people I've interviewed, hundreds of thousands of celebrities, and so many things have happened behind the scenes that I'd love to share in a book one day. Speaking, motivational speaking, even just talking to young people and trying to help them in their careers with workshops. I'd love to do something like that. And the list is long. So
that's amazing.
I think you got to focus on the things that you're most passionate about. And to begin with, it really is about making a difference.
I think that's incredible. And I think that there definitely is room for a paradigm shift in terms of how people get into any career, right? And things have changed. And so I love that. I think that feeds your spirit as you're, you've already achieved so much, but to be able to now give back, that's so beautiful. So, and I would definitely read your book. So in terms of if you were to write a book, what was the most interesting interview and why?
Oh, there's so many, but I will say that one of the reasons why I do what I do is because it does still scare me. And, celebrities, especially, they come with an entourage, they can be intimidating. I've never really looked at celebrity that way. I've always just sort of looked at them as people because they're just us. And I've tried to always treat them that way, is that, as long as they're seen and heard and you don't make it about all the celebrity and you make them about who they are, it always sort of works out better in terms of our interactions and being able to connect. So that part's really great. But I do think that I'm scared always because I don't know how things are going to go. It's live. I don't know what anybody's going to say. And I interviewed Spike Lee, and he's known for being very outspoken in the best way possible. He's a genius, but he'll call you out. So if you say something that he doesn't agree with, or, he doesn't think you really get it, he will call you out. I've watched him. I watched interviews while I was researching him where he's done that. So I went into that interview so nervous because I thought, I just got to get it right. And I have to make sure I understand the material. We were talking about his film Chirac, which is, not a fun topic. It's a very serious topic, talking about crime and shooting in Chicago. So anyway, it ended up going really great. But I think the whole lead up, realizing that, it's important to do the research, but words matter, and how you form a question and how you phrase it matters. So really putting that time and energy into having a natural conversation, but at the same time, understanding the material fully.
That's incredible. And I think that almost brings us right back to what we were talking about in the beginning, the idea that you have that passion, but you have to put the hard work in. And then when you're doing something that scares you, you're growing, right?
For sure. And I think if we didn't do that, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I know for myself, that self-talk that we all do, where you can convince yourself that you're not smart enough or good enough, or somebody else would be better for it. I would do that. I would convince myself not to do it and to just give it to somebody else because it's too scary. It's too much. I'm okay. Whereas in this role, I have no choice. It's putting myself in this scary situation every day and learning that each time it's okay. Each time it works out. As long as you do the work and you have a real genuine passion for it. And I think if you're being authentic and real, that also makes a difference. You have to feel connected to what you're doing.
Yeah. And people can see that, right? So is there any final thoughts or ideas that you have for, maybe young women that are, again, trying to get into the profession and during COVID?
I think that, in general, it's so important that you love whatever it is that you're doing. And I think, I can't overstate it enough, because waking up at 3:00 in the morning and having, really no life and working all holidays and all the things that come with this job in particular, you couldn't do it if you didn't love it. So my advice is, no matter what you choose to do, make sure you love it, but also that let people's stories, and through your podcast, I'm sure a lot of young people will hear individual stories, that you don't necessarily have to know what you want to do as well. It's really important to explore. There's a line, just because you wander doesn't mean you're lost. And I think that's an important thing in your career journey, is that you try different things, that if you think there's something you really want to do, seek out a mentor, somebody who's already doing it and doing it well. And if you watch them and you learn from them and it's still something you want to do, great. But you may find out that it's not something you want to do at all. And then you pivot and you find something else. I think it's also important to make genuine connections. People talk about networking, and I think that word is so tough, because what does that mean? Does that mean you exchange business cards? You get an email and you send them what does that mean? To me, I really believe it's genuine, honest connections. Reach out to people you genuinely admire. Reach out to people you really want to hear your advice from, because over time you can build a real connection, and that can lead to something for sure. But don't do it because you think it's going to lead to something. Do it because you genuinely seek wisdom from that person. And to me, that's the way you move ahead in your career, whether you're starting out or whether you've been at it for 20 years. I'm learning that the way forward, especially in COVID times, is connection, because it's what we are missing the most. And when people feel seen and heard, no matter who that person may be, whether it's the person that, is walking down the street and you're saying good morning to them, or whether it's, a family member, or whether it's somebody you work with, that's really powerful. And if you can tap into that, I think it can take you far.
That's incredible. Really, really good feedback and advice. And, I was interviewing a CEO of a pretty large company in RSM, and the woman, she gave incredible advice as well for all those women leaders that are running large organizations, that you need to make sure that for those that are kind of remaining quiet during this period, that maybe also reach out to people like that to make sure they're okay. Because I think that there's a whole mental health component to this as well, that certainly I know, being in this house for how many months now. I think I said to my husband the other day, I don't care what I'm doing, but tomorrow I'm going outside to do something.
Yeah, no,
it's making sure people are okay as well. So
yeah, and I think that, sometimes we forget, and us putting on the brave face and doing the things that we need to get done in our daily lives, that, it's so important to take that time to realize that everybody's sort of going through something, no matter what it is. And if you recognize that in people to begin with, before you even have a conversation, that they may be going through something, I think if you come from that place of empathy, just as a starting point, you probably get more out of people, and you'll feel better about yourself because it's caring about people in a different way.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And I think that people are really going to learn a lot from your interview for sure.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been fun. It just flew by, didn't it?
I know it did. I really, really appreciate you taking the time, because I think that you had so many incredible things to say, and I really do think it will help. And
Thank
this,
you.
It's funny, like I started this around COVID time, but it's, I'm hoping too that it actually does fill a need.
Yeah, I feel like what you're doing will resonate with so many people at so many levels, whether you're a young person, you're a student, which has been so tough for students as well, who lost their years or were, not able to get a job in this sort of workforce with what's been going on. So I think you have people who are going to be watching from that perspective and listening from that perspective, but then you also have people who have, achieved a lot of success in their career. Of like, what's next, and what do I, what do I pursue next, and how do I go about it? Because it can be scary and risky, and all those things that we talked about. So we sort of cover it all.
Thank you for listening to Breaking Barriers. If you would like more information on how Women Leadership Nation can help you thrive in your career, please visit our website and sign up for our mailing list. You'll receive exclusive content, updates, and new podcast episodes delivered right to your inbox. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, keep breaking